Here we go. So, Dan, first of all, thank you so much for joining me as a guest for this podcast. We would like to hear your thoughts from none other than the person who is being so grounded from the real world experience. So, thank you so much, Dan, for joining me from R&D side, consulting in a life science for so many years. I would like to understand from you, what do you think how AI adoption is going to change the life science industry in coming years?
Well, first of all, Aditya, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure. I think I really believe the word an inflection point in the R&D industry. What I'm seeing at my clients is everybody wants to talk about AI, but there hasn't been a tremendous amount of adoption. I think when that starts, I think it's going to be like a dam bursting, that it will quite literally be a competitive disadvantage to not have not only an artificial intelligence strategy, but actually deployed system, be that generative or, as we get into the second generation, agentic. I think the potential in my domain is tremendous. I think generative AI can write protocols. It can do, quite frankly, first pass medical writing right now out of the box. To my knowledge, no one's doing it yet. I think, like I said, that's going to change really quickly. If they are doing it, they're doing it at an individual level where they're a medical writer and they're using generative AI, some publicly available platform, and then using that to create a first pass. But I do think this will become more the commonplace and be used more broadly throughout the industry. I think things will really change when we get to the agentic AI, where the artificial intelligence can run the entire study, do many of the jobs that like a study manager does, meaning make sure all the trial participants are engaged, involved, doing their communication, what they said in the old days, doing their paperwork, talking about, efficacy and what they're seeing, talking about side effects and potentially covering any pharmacovigilance. Agentic AI will eventually be able to do that, and that will make it much less expensive, much less labor intensive, and I think that'll be truly game changing.
Yeah, that's a very great point, and I totally echo with your thought. Like agentic AI is going to change a lot of dynamics in this life science industry, starting from drug research to commercialization and pharmacovigilance as well, post marketing surveillance. Then, like a lot of times, when we do think about implementing AI solutions, right, preferably in the drug research or real world evidence, the challenge sometimes we face is of reproducibility, right? A lot of times it happens like data is should be reproducible, right? So how considering this as a overall pharmacovigilance and R&D ecosystem, what are the challenges you think could be a potential for AI adoption?
I think so. We have a saying, it's really easy to get a meeting with AI as your topic. It seems like everybody wants to know what's cutting edge, what's, dare I say, bleeding edge. But to my knowledge, no one's really used it in the R&D setting. So like I said, I think the barrier is just the fact that it's unknown. People will socialize horror stories like about hallucination, and even though it's extremely rare, that makes people question the data. So like I said, I think there's going to be a critical mass that's going to occur, and then it will be just widely adopted. I think we're going to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour very, very quickly. 60 miles per hour is my euphemism for, full adoption. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be, like I said before, it's going to be a competitive disadvantage if you're not using AI. We're talking about, administering protocols and a clinical trial like phase 1A, first in human studies, or even phase 2A, first time treating a disease. That's really going to be big. That is where we can pull a lot of labor out. But AI will also be very big in the pre-clin stage. And when I say preclin, I mean, taking a look at large molecules and looking for incongruencies or looking for something that will make it antithetical to the human genome. There'll be a tremendous ability, just like we hear about radiologists. Radiologists, their position may become obfuscated by AI because already they're seeing an AI being able to read an MRI or a CT scan or even an X-ray better. I think similarly, this could be deployed in the early stage and actually develop molecules that are going to have a covalent bond and are going to provide the chemistry needed, so that they know before they even open the dog lab that this is something that should treat whatever modality they're looking to treat. And so I do think there's tremendous potential for growth. The ultimate vision, I was speaking to a chief technology officer of a large top 20 pharma, and he said something that I thought was very interesting. Nobody knows what the end state will be, but everybody knows it will be better, more efficient, that it will be de-risked, that much more risk will be taken out of it, and that it will be less expensive to administer. And I think that's really interesting. I think that is telling. Again, it just still feels like people are reticent to be the first. But I think once people start doing it, it'll be tremendous.
No, I think you are absolutely spot on. You touched upon the topic on the molecule research. And recently I was just reading, article about a research on alpha code, right? Which has been done by Google DeepMind. They have unfolded unused molecules, which has been so like without research or something has been there, right? So I think usage by using the AI, a lot of things can be unfolded, right? Like the molecules, genetics, which are not being used till now, could be unfolded, could be with the help of AI, and a lot of disease or something can be, further researched and all. So yeah, that's a very valid point. Then when we talk about the recent research and development and clinical side, I think like data security is very one of the major challenge we have from the regulatory perspective to have a data sensitivity as well. So solutions such as literature review, identifying adverse events during the clinical trials or post marketing surveillance could be a very low hanging solution for these pharmaceutical companies. What else do you think like AI could be useful? Practical example of AI in the clinical development side.
So there, I think there's three areas where AI will be most impactful in the near term. The first being the clinical dev, like we talked about, the clinical development. So the actual looking at the molecule and looking for congruencies and making sure that it does work within the confines of the human genome. Then the next phase is clinical operations. Can generative AI write protocols? Can generative AI do the medical writing first pass and things like that? And then the third piece is the whole regulatory affairs piece.
Mhm.
The vision is to be able to feed all the pertinent data into a generative AI model, meaning this is the market size, this
Mhm.
is the competitive landscape, this is the level of maturity of the competitive products. Is it worth my while to invest? The one thing, it's almost a credo we're hearing in R&D and life sciences, be it biotech or, pre-commercial biotech all the way up to big pharma, and that's
Mhm.
fail fast. If we are going, we don't want to fail in phase 2. We definitely don't want to fail in phase 3. So if there's an issue, let's find out in pre-clin. Let's find out really early on. If there's a regulatory issue, what does the regulatory landscape look like? Is this will this molecule? And I say molecule because I think largely they'll be biologics, but is this molecule going to be something that could get fast track designated because it's unique and there's a great demand for treating that modality. So we think AI can, we can get to the point where we can feed all this data in and then just get a more holistic response. It's really interesting because there's a lot of companies out there that have proprietary data sets and proprietary algorithms and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I won't name names, but the big concern is that these companies will be obfuscated by artificial intelligence. And I think they're all looking and they're all trying to adapt and kind of present their AI flavor. But the question is, are proprietary data sets even going to be that valuable when you can really use agentic and generative AI to glean insight.
So then you mentioned about clinical operations and drug research, right? Where most of the cases AI could be highly leveraged. So I understand and completely echo with your thought here. Like there are different processes during the clinical trials. We do identify sites, we do real world evidence analysis, we do clinical trials monitoring and all. All these scenarios, AI could be highly leveraged, right? When I'm saying AI, it could be potentially as a generative AI based solutions to have a predictive modeling, machine learning, etc. So I think that's a very valid point. Like clinical operations could be highly streamlined with the help of AI and all. Another thing is like when we talk about research and development, Dan, what do you think? Like recently, we've been hearing a lot of momentum around weight loss drugs, right? A lot of companies are in the instrumental in terms of developing these kind of drugs. What do you think the future of clinical operations while developing these kind of drugs and all?
I mean, the potential is huge. Obviously the giants in this space are Novo Nordisk and Lilly.
Yeah.
And their biggest challenges right now, to be totally honest, and this is anecdotal. I don't mean to speak for these companies,
Mhm.
but what I'm gleaning is really their number one challenge, or the thing that's so front of mind, is really increasing manufacturing capacity. Lilly has just broken ground in the middle of winter in Indianapolis in like something like a 4 million square foot factory. They'll be used to create the GLP-1s. Kind of try to think of the chemical name, but the various GLP-1s, and Novo's doing the same thing. Um, so an interesting area that I think is going to become more prevalent is, and this is more on the commercial side, commercial strategy, but because they're here in the United States, there's a great variance in how much of these drugs that will be paid for by people's medical insurance. And similarly in Europe, where there is universal health care, they need they usually need some sort of a rider, meaning they have to have diabetes, or they have to have a BMI, body mass index above 40, to show morbid obesity, things like that, to get the drug. And I think this will evolve into kind of a free enterprise approach. I think as competition gets greater, prices will come down, and it'll get to be the point where for $200 a month, you might be able to manage it yourself. And I think if somebody has health issues, or if they just want to look better, $200 won't be a big barrier. Now, the interesting thing is they're going to need AI for global reference pricing. A pricing model that's specific to each country, and to the level of affluence, to the level participation by healthcare insurance, to the appetite for doing this totally on one's own dime.
Mhm.
People spend right now tens of thousands of dollars for cosmetic surgery, frankly, bariatric surgery, and liposuction, and and cryo sculpting, and all these things. People are spending tens of thousands of dollars to look better. And I think this will evolve into something where it becomes cheap enough that people can make that decision themselves. But I think the way to model that so that they're not leaving money on the table is to create a global reference pricing model and develop specific subsets for each country so that they can kind of optimize their pricing so that it's high enough that they can remain as profitable as possible. They are publicly traded companies, that they can increase, people that are taking advantage of the GLP-1s. I think Right now it's an efficacy race. There's two products they have the lion's share of the market, and one is slightly more efficacious, and the other they're trying to tweak the dosing there just was some announcement around their phase 3 clinical trials, how they were able to increase the dosage to equal the efficacy level of the other product. That's another area where I think AI will be huge. Well, they'd be able to look at all the factors, and decide, okay, these in a reasonable percentage of the population, this percentage will get these side effects. They will increase by X amount due to the drug. I mean, this is stuff that the AI algorithmically can forecast, and if they can kind of figure that out, I think that'll be huge. The other big push with the GLP-1s is to go to an oral form. Right now, the most efficacious, they do have oral pills, but their efficacy is, I don't want to cite a specific number, but they're not as efficacious as the injectables. So I think there are people that, will not inject themselves. There are people that are afraid of needles. So I think, there'll be a lot of pressure on the market to get there. So how can AI facilitate, a way where someone's taking a daily pill rather than a weekly shot? And that is something that I think will drive user adoption and acceptance and make it the standard of care for obesity. And I think AI can be heavily leveraged in figuring that out and figuring out a strategy that's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the weight loss drugs and its implication, I have in mind, like, other than weight loss drugs and all, a lot of different other disease areas, such as different oncologies, depressive disorders, diabetes. All these are like very key disease areas and neuroscience especially. A lot of
Your kind is huge.
yeah, so a lot of companies are focusing their R&D development and processes there in these disease areas, right? And obviously, when we see like the patent of the high performing drugs are going to be expired in next 5 years or so, like I was hearing a report and it was saying like 200 billions of worth of patents is going to expire in the next few years, right? For different pharmaceutical companies. So this grounds up the good opportunity for research and development, especially for real world evidence and the clinical operations, of our pharmaceutical company. What's your thought around it?
That's kind of a really interesting niche from my perspective in that, I think, well, first of all, talking about the neurologic disease, and I'm not specifically talking about neurodegenerative diseases, I'm talking more about schizophrenia, depression, bipolar. There's a history of, I mean, when someone gets on these meds, they tend to stay on them for many, many years, decades, sometimes for the rest of their lives. So, I think, there's a patent cliff. There's always been a patent cliff. People are very concerned about this. I think the biggest anecdote or the most compelling anecdote is Humira. Humira has been off patent since 2016, but because it's a biologic and because it's very difficult to replicate, they have lost tremendous, amount of market share, but it's still a $10 billion a year drug. I think AI can hopefully serve as a crystal ball and, where we can, the industry can input, data and then basically interface with the AI. Okay, what do we, if this scenario happens, where do we pivot? What if someone comes out with a biologic that has an identical efficacy level, but it's a different molecule? Is that something that we can protect legally? Things like that. And again, just to circle back, I think the other interesting piece will be the regulatory environment. Can we, what can we do early on? What can we do in preclin? What can we do in phase 1A? What can we do in phase 2A to make sure that this will be approved and approved by the EMA, the FDA, the other major regulatory bodies as quickly as possible? How can we fast track? All that takes time out of the equation, which becomes savings, and that's what everybody's looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to understand, like, since we talk a lot about AI development and all. So then, it would be great if you can just throw some light the human element on the AI adoption, right? So a lot of time, what we have seen is there's some challenges from the early AI adopters and laggards, right? Those leaders who had not adopted AI versus now identifying the opportunity area in AI. So what do you think? Like early adopters are even edge here, a little bit on elements here.
That's a really interesting question. I think the technology has to prove itself more. I think people will use it, especially for things like medical writing and writing protocols for studies. There's going to need to be, first of all, people will use it ad hoc, and there'll be issues associated with that. Somebody will use one AI platform and somebody else will use a different. So then they'll want everybody on the same sheet of music. So then that'll be the impetus to get companies to invest in AI for things like medical writing. And I think the thought would be in protocol writing too. I think the thought would be to have AI run the first pass, and I suspect this is happening already, where AI will do the first pass on the medical writing activity or the protocol writing activity. Then a human will, for freedom, extend the line to make a few additions ad hoc or as needed, and then present that to the larger group for further vetting. Like I said, I suspect people are doing that right now. I think it needs to get formalized, and I think it will, just because
Okay.
somebody will be using Chat GPT and somebody else will be using Google and somebody else will be using Apple, which is Chat GPT, but the different platforms, the Azure platform, whatever. And so I think, companies will be under a lot of pressure, especially large companies, to adopt an enterprise-wide AI platform. And that'll be interesting because then you're talking to the CIO and the CTO rather than like the chief scientific officer. But I think
Yeah.
that will be a lot of pressure to adopt an enterprise-wide artificial intelligence.
I also feel the same when we speak to our stakeholders, at my organization level. So my question was around like, how do you see this R&D industry is going to evolve coming years? Let's say 5 year down the line, especially right now, IRA, impacts are there. Patents are expiring. A lot of tariffs are being implemented by new administration and all. So how do you see like this R&D is industry or especially in the pharma is going to evolve over the years?
It's so funny because we've been globalizing, as a species for the last 15 years, and we've made such great progress. And I think some politicians just, fear their own irrelevance, and hence they now want to put up these barriers that hadn't been here before. And I think that's quite concerning. I do have the utmost confidence in man's ingenuity. I think people will eventually start seeing that such behavior hurts us, and I think there will be some pushback. So I am, cautiously optimistic. But in terms of artificial intelligence, I think it's going to, like I said, it's going to it's I think the first thing we need to do is define it. It's the oldest adage in the world, but when you say AI, when you ask what is AI to 10 people, I mean 10 intelligent IT experts, you oftentimes get 8 or 10 different answers. Somebody will talk about something that at least I would refer to as machine learning, or somebody else will talk about, generative AI in the context of agentic AI or something like that. And so I think we need to kind of formalize what exactly we're talking about, how much human intervention will be involved, where does that fit? Almost create a workflow so that instead of peer review, there's human review of artificial intelligence deliverables. I think that's going to happen quickly because, like I said, right now everybody's afraid to be the first. But once people start adopting it, they're going to drive tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D costs out of the process. One of a phase 3 clinical trial can cost $1 billion just for phase 3, and that's because you have 3,000 patients. You're paying them for their participation. You're administering. You have to develop a supply chain to make sure everybody gets the drug as needed. and that everybody's taking the drug and is adhering to the instructions and all that. These are things that the value of AI is going to be so huge.
Yeah.
Where basically an AI agent will call up a person, "Have you taken your pill today? Do you feel anything?" And ask a series of questions, and it'll centrally and collate that into one central repository, and then it'll create a dashboard so that the executives can just go in and look and see, oh boy, there's look for trends, and that way they'll be able to jump in earlier on and potentially find a problem before it manifests itself as a full-blown issue, and
Yeah.
do something corrective in flight rather than, okay, we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board, phase 3 failure. We just wasted billions. Like the early 7 to 10 years ago, the neurodegenerative diseases, there were 3 Alzheimer drugs, 1 Parkinson's drug that all failed in phase 3, and
Yeah.
each company lost $10 billion, when that failed. So they had to go back to the drawing board, and start all over. Nobody wants to do that again. So everybody wants to kind of figure it out. AI is here. It's not going anywhere. It's going to make things better. We just
Yeah.
need to, kind of formalize it and make sure everybody is talking about it in the same context and everybody has a full understanding. And I think when we get that, then things will progress very, very quickly.
And that's where I guess then responsible AI is coming into the picture, especially in the life science and healthcare. Responsible AI is making sure to outline any specific risk associated with the patients or a business operations. So I think that is also going to have on a much larger space in coming future.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting here in the US because there'll be a real concern around, I mean, there's always a concern around HIPAA, but they'll, the confidentiality when you are in a clinical trials, you're dealing with patients, especially
Yeah.
in phase 2 and phase 3. So I think one of the really greatest values in R&D that AI will be able to drive is lessening that patient population. Like I said, phase 2A, phase 2B, they tend to have hundreds of patients. You get into phase 3, it's thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, depending on how widely used. So I think AI can be used to find those people, work those people into the system. But even more importantly, because AI can look at the human genome and make sure that we're dealing with people that have the exact disease and the exact disease progression that this drug was designed. So maybe so we know this person has this disease. We know that this is how this disease manifests. This is right in the wheelhouse for this drug. AI has determined that. So do we really need 3,000 patients when 300 that are exactly right will give us better, more high quality information? So
Yes.
if we get that as an end state, I mean, that will literally cut 90% of that $1 billion out of the cost.
So I think that's all these great conversations and thoughts and all. Then especially you are from real world evidence business. I'm spending like around 8 years in this business. I think our job is safe. Well, a lot of things are going on.
I think I'm a little closer to retirement than you are, my friend. So, I'm grateful for that. But you're right. I think, I think all the nightmare scenarios are when the human element's completely removed, and I
Yeah.
think we're too smart to allow that.
Mm.
Because if you totally remove the human element, then you have to worry about someone being able to hack in or change things. So there needs to be this constant interface. And I mean, the ultimate vision is something like Neuralink. You don't have a screen, and you don't, it's literally you don't have a keyboard. You're thinking it, and you're getting the answers, and you're seeing it in real time. Now, I guess the question is that 5 years out or is that 50 years out? But that
Mm.
is probably the end state where I mean, you could argue that we're there already with our, mobile phone. We have all the information of the world available to us at any given time. Well, this would be even more intuitive, more easy to use. and more practical where you can use it in real time. I think the future is incredibly bright. It's going to change so quickly that it's hard to really predict how it's going to change,
Yeah.
but it's exciting. And I know patient outcomes are going to improve. I know things like a lot more rare diseases will be treated that it just didn't make sense to develop a drug for because there just wasn't a big enough global patient population. When we drive 90% of the cost out, we'll be able to bring, medicines for these rare diseases. And that's going to change so many lives for the positive. So, again, overall, I'm very, very optimistic.
Great. Yeah. No, that's a great thought actually. Then, and I'm to echo with the whole thought of yours, and I'm also very highly optimistic about this particular business. And actually, this is making a real impact on the patient's life. Recently, I have worked on one of the STA engagement where we've been doing, the identification of the medical device, which essentially, identify the impact of, maternal health or so. So this has been approved by FDA. So at the end, it feels like very proud and great to have an impact on maternal health at the end through our analytics driven solutions. So yeah, I think this is very satisfying job also.
That's fascinating. The other thing I think you just kind of provoked, we've been thinking largely about the pharmaceutical biotechnology side, but what is a medical device is becoming changed. Software as a medical device.
Mhm.
Eventually there'll be AI as a medical device,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that would be the ultimate diagnostician because that could literally monitor microprocesses within the human body. So
Great.
again, another potential area of where AI could have tremendous impact.
I know, I absolutely agree with you. And we are at the last leg of our conversation. To be very honest, we are just going to wind up our questions. Yeah, I think those were some of the conversations which I wanted to have it with you, and I am absolutely feel honored to have you as a guest to understand your thought about especially in the field of AI and agentic AI you mentioned. We are totally agreed about how this R&D side is going to evolve in coming years, right? It's going to have a rapid change, and this is what we can just, see right now. Like, it's at the same time, it's exciting. It's going to be a very roller coaster journey for sure for all of us in coming future. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining me as a guest. It's a great honor again for me as well as for my audience to have you here. Now I'm stopping my recording.
Well, I was just going to say it's been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed this, and I think it's a fascinating topic. Let's maybe reconvene the year and see how accurate some of our predictions. I do think there'll be major adoption in the next 12 months.
Oh, great, great. Like by the end of 2025, you mentioned, right?
I do. I really do. I think the most likely, well, the world's largest pharmaceutical company is, I think, farthest along without naming names. They're going to, they're not as afraid as maybe some others of being bleeding edge. So it'll be very interesting. But again, it was my honor to be here. Thank you, Aditya. Really
Mm.
enjoyed it. And let's chat in a year and see where we're at.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan, for your time. I hope you are having a great evening.
Thank you. You do the same. Bye bye now.
Bye.